Hello, my name is A. Joseph Dupre III. I'm a member of the Technical Product Management team within the Communications Solution Group at Keysight Technologies. And today in this video blog, I'm going to highlight some of the tips and tricks from our latest blog, Optimizing Performance and Cost when Running Application Validations in a Public Cloud. For this and other blogs, please go to our website at ixiacom.com. Thank you. So let's get started. What we want to do when it comes to optimizing performance is we want, in many cases, to test a web service and validate that we get the kind of performance as an end user that we expect, or that the public cloud infrastructure that we have in place is going to give us the kind of service to our customers that we need. And we want to have ways of measuring that. When we go to Amazon and verify the types of instances that we might select for a particular service, a web service or a triple play service or whatever we might be providing on the cloud. In the case of an example like Amazon, they'll tell us information about the different types of instances that they have available in the public cloud and what some of the characteristics like vCPUs, virtual CPUs, and memory that are available, very similar to the private cloud. But what's a little bit different is when you're in the public cloud, you don't have full control and visibility into all the inner workings of that public cloud. You have some high-level guidance in terms of smaller instance sizes with fewer CPUs, fewer amounts of memory might give you a certain amount of network performance. Moderate, larger ones might give you high, but there's different sizes, and then the largest in a particular family might give you 10 gigabit, for example. But you might want to drill down more carefully into these numbers because they can certainly impact how much you spend in the cloud, right? You want to get the size that makes sense for you. And so if you're testing a service, you're going to want to use a tool like our IxLoad application performance test tool within the Amazon marketplace. And if you want to get started with IxLoad, you can certainly go there and get more information about the test tool, and you can absolutely go down and get example templates for how to deploy exactly what we're going to do in this short video. If you need more information or more detailed videos on how to deploy, please subscribe to our Ixia Training TV video channel on YouTube. There's lots of great videos for Amazon, Microsoft, public and private cloud, VMware, and others, where you can go and get information on how to deploy our virtual edition tools in those clouds. And so back over in Amazon, you can download templates, CloudFormation, Amazon calls them CloudFormation templates, that will let you construct different use cases that are common to our customers when they're getting started. For example, a 2 VM1 use case, which means 2 of our virtual test appliances to generate traffic. And the reason why we want to do this is when we look at the instance types, it's not just their performance level that we want to get more detail on. We also want to be able to determine, which trade-offs make sense for us in terms of cost effectiveness, right? Sometimes for our workload, a particular instance type might be capable of much higher performance. Let's say we're picking throughput as our key performance indicator, the metric that we want to run in our application tool. Then, that might be for a certain workload that might, be able to get much higher, but for our particular workload might be more complex. There might be other things running on our servers that we want to test. And so we really need to understand what is the infrastructure capable of doing and what is our particular web service capable of doing. But before we can even do that, we really want to understand what is our test tool capable of doing and what size makes the most sense for our test case, and keeping our costs down while still getting the kind of performance that we want to see. So in our blog, we have example tables that you're going to want to typically construct something like this, where you're going to want to take the information that Amazon gives you about the size choices and the options that you have. Maybe your particular workload is more memory optimized, but when you're talking about the test tool side, it's typically you're going to pick one of the compute optimized instances because you want to get as much performance. You want the tool, typically you want the test tool to be capable of generating more traffic than your service is expecting to see, and because you might want to grow that over time with an elastic auto scale group or something like that, where you might deploy multiple instances and want to be able to understand, have a test tool where you can generate more and more virtual appliances, deploy those, and then generate more traffic. And so we created some tables to give us an understanding of, if we deployed a certain instance type, what is the actual performance, beyond just moderate or high or even 10 gigabits per second, what will we actually get with our particular workload. And so we created some example workloads, plain HTTP, HTTPS, with the encryption, and because that can have, the encryption selection you choose can have a major impact on overall performance capability in general of that instance type. And certainly when you actually are testing your target web service, for example, that could have many layers of complexity. And so you really want to isolate that first. And so in our first blog in the series, we focus on optimizing and tuning our test tool to that environment. And so we want to build some of these tables. And so we have some handy tools. I'm going to use an example of IxLoad real quick. Now, for more details on this and a deeper dive, go to that Ixia Training TV. But to just give you a couple of highlights, we wanted to build the table for each of these instance types and understand whether it's plain HTTP or it's encrypted, with whatever ciphers that we're going to use. We wanted to understand and have a couple different tables available to us ahead of time that show us what our performance would be for these different instance types and when might it make sense to jump to a larger size instance type and when it might be more costly to do so. So, we found, for example, that if we're using plain text, it might make sense if we want to go up to 10 gigabit or 9 gigabits per second. On the throughput, it makes sense to have that larger instance type, right? You might double your cost, but you're going to get double your performance. But with something like an encrypted traffic type, depending on the type, you might not get that doubling of performance. You may pay twice as much for the largest instance type. The tendency is to think, oh, I'll go big or go home. But in reality, that may be the more costly solution. It doesn't give you any real benefit. So you want to have those test cases. The great thing about the cloud is you can deploy those templates on the Amazon Marketplace, build your 2 VM1 scenario, which I'll show you in a second, and be able to basically get those numbers for yourself, for your individual workload, and be very certain about what kind of performance you're going to get and what those cost trade-offs are. So let's go ahead and put that away for a second. Let's take a look at the environment that my template created. So I went over and deployed one of the templates from the marketplace using CloudFormation. That did all the heavy lifting and magic that CloudFormation does for me. So we're really big proponents at Keysight about automation and getting, again, an understanding of how the test tool is tuned and optimized for your environment first. So deploy it. Go over here. It's running. I'm going to put a filter on, so you can see the three things that are relevant here. So I have an IxLoad client and I have 2 virtual test appliances, also called VM1s. And I want to understand in this VPC configuration, in this very basic scenario I have where I have 2 subnets, a .2 and a .3. I just want to understand, maybe I'm new to Amazon, maybe I don't really know what that high level is and how to differentiate between, a C4.2x large and a C4.4x large. So let's pick a C4.4x large, deploy it using the template very easily, and let's run some traffic between them to understand what kind of performance we're going to get, and let's mark that down in our table. So I just wanted to walk through quick highlights of some of the things that we talk about in our blog of how we did that to create those types of tables. And again, you can pair your automation template that has a known good configuration with an IxLoad configuration, for example, that has the type of workflow and traffic that you want, the IP addressing that matches the cloud, etc. And then you can set a timeline of an objective for that traffic. So in this case, this happens to be plain traffic, and we're going to try and send 5 gig worth of traffic. So that's using an industry standard application test tool, which is your IxLoad Virtual Edition, which we have editions that are virtual editions that are in the private cloud that people are very familiar with. So when you're moving to the public cloud, you can reuse a lot of those configurations, and you know what your target goals are and your optimizations in the private cloud. You can do some of those things in the public cloud. You can choose, for instance, an instance type like C4 that supports SRIOV, right, single root IO virtualization, to get more performance out of that instance, to get some hardware acceleration. You can choose AES-NI, right, the encryption standard, where AES is basically offloaded to hardware. So Intel has AES-NI for the instruction set that helps accelerate that. So there's a lot of things going on in the public cloud that are similar to what are happening first in the private cloud that optimize those things, but you're not the one in control of that server. You're not the one pinning CPUs to things and eking out every single instance. There's also a lot of variability, as you know, in the private cloud, and a lot of variability in the public cloud where there's transient behaviors. Maybe there's some bottleneck from something else you're doing on that VPC. And so you want to understand, is there a bottleneck? Maybe there's no bottleneck. Maybe there's no impact. Your service is completely independent, but you want to validate every one of those things just like you do in the private cloud, because one variable change can make a significant difference. We've seen that, right? So let's take an objective of 5 gig and let's see if we can push that throughput, get the numbers that we saw in our table. Again, you'll build your own table and validate that, right? So just because I got a particular result does not mean that that's what you should use as your starting point in your test plan. So certainly, particularly when you're pitching your test plan to your management, and they need to justify the cost and effectiveness of the test plan and your service that you're trying to test. Having that test tool, having those guidelines, that benchmark allows you to say, this is what the test tool can do. This is how many instances of traffic generation we need to be able to do to create gigs worth of traffic or thousands of simulated users or whatever metric you care about. IxLoad can help you easily configure that, for example, and you'll know what the test tool is capable in that public cloud, and so you'll have a repeatable benchmark that you can go against. And so what you can see here quickly is that 4.8 gig is what I'm actually getting. So I have an objective. We know from the private cloud and our software that with that many CPUs, we can actually, with that far less CPUs, we can actually generate higher traffic. But we need to understand what the public cloud infrastructure is limiting us to. What is the real observable, measurable performance that our client and server pair in this particular configuration over here? We have a client and server simulation going on in that VPC, because that's the first level of complexity. When you start layering on VPC peering or third-party VNFs, virtual network functions, that's when you get into a lot of complexity, and it's harder to back that all out if you don't start with what is my performance for my infrastructure first. What does the tool indicate is the overall performance of the infrastructure before I add in complexity? So that's a quick little intro to our blog. Please do go to ixiacom.com and subscribe to our blogs there. Read more about other cloud blogs that you might be interested in, public and private, and definitely subscribe to the Ixia Training TV channel to go more in depth into how to configure these scenarios. Thank you for watching.